I always work with multiple photos on a page because I take so many and have a hard time choosing between them, especially with photos of my kids. I feel like multiple pictures helps me tell a story, but I feel like using different sizes for the photos could help that visual story if I could figure out how to print them and what sizes to use. Glitter Girl, can you help?
Of course I can. Today I'm going to work with 3 photos, and it's 3 photos from an event where I have about 50. So if it had not been in my own home or our own party, I probably would have taken far, far more. But it was Wonder Boy's first birthday, and the big party at our house, and so you know how there's that balance if you want to get photos of absolutely everything, but you also have lots to do. You want to enjoy the party, but you're also hosting the party, and you have all sorts of different jobs. So I think that having 50 photos is quite a lot at the end of the day, and I'm not going to scrapbook all 50. There's a good handful, though, that I do want to scrapbook. And I've chosen 3 for my first layout here, and then I am going to make additional layouts, but not a whole album worth. I just want maybe 3 or 4 pages that focus on different elements of the party. So what I thought was that the best way to help me choose which photos I was going to use, I could go about it 2 ways. Depending on the way I'm scrapbooking, if I want to just do 1 page because there's one particular photo or one set of photos that's really inspiring me, then I don't worry too much about the before and after and all of the other photos that I'm going to scrap on that topic, and I just pick the photo that is really inspiring me and I go with it, and I don't worry about what I'm going to have to do later, because eventually I'll fall into mood 2, which is I go to my photos and I know the album, what it's looking like, and what pages I'm missing or what stories I'm missing, and then I go to my photo library and say, oh, okay, actually, I really want to tell this story and these photos will help. And so there's that first impulse part of creating, and then there's also this planning and looking and evaluating part of creating, and those are 2 elements of the process for me. So in this particular case, I'm in a little bit of a planning mood, but not hugely. What I did was I went to the folder where I had all of the photos from this party, and as it happens, I normally print a lot of my photos at 4x6 as I go, but I have a big gap in my photo library where I didn't do my twice a month photo ordering that I normally do, and it included the first birthday party, and I thought, actually, I'll leave that, because then it'll give me a chance to print photos at different sizes, so that I could have a little bit of variety. So that worked out as a little happy coincidence. Looking at the photos, I found that I had 2 different colorings of the pictures, because the ones I took with my big camera were really bright and light like these, and then I also have in that 50 I have some photos that friends took, but they were taken on phones and they have filters, so they have a softer light to them, a warmer tone. I don't like them next to each other in this particular example, so today I'm going to work with these 3 that are really bright, but I am going to make another layout with one of the warmer photos this week, and I'll show you how the 2 end up in my album rather than all on the same page. Okay, I'm talking way too much. It's time to get scrapbooking. But what I wanted to show you was that sometimes I can find natural groups within the photos. So I looked at the fact that I wanted to make sure his cake was in the album. And I had these photos with his face and with different family members, and matches up with the cake, not only because the color and the white balance in the photos is similar, but also because this is everybody singing happy birthday with the cake in the picture. And this photo I know was taken as we were cutting the cake and giving it to everybody, and he was kind of looking up in amazement at what was going on with this cake distribution system. So those photos all link together in my mind. So 2 things so far then. Look at the color of the photos and see if you have a natural divide where some look warm and some look cool, or some are light and some are dark, and you can separate them by pages that way. And then also look at the groupings of the story. Is there something that you know you want in there, and then can you find other photos that help back it up? In this case, I wanted the cake to be the big picture and these two to be smaller, because although his face is gorgeous here and I really love this photo, I have a similar expression on his face in another photo from the same event that has been printed big. So I wasn't too worried about making this one a little smaller. And this one, I looked at it big on the computer screen and it didn't wow me as a huge photo. But I liked how you could see all of the family and you could see the room and you could see the cake in the smaller photo. So that's how I made the decision. Last thing before I start actually cutting paper. This one's a 5x7. And when I print at home, I have 3 sizes of photo paper that I keep to hand. 4x6, 5x7, and A4, which is the European equivalent of 8.5 by 11 letter paper in America. So if you're in North America, then just instead of thinking A4, think 8.5 by 11. But it's that full page size. And so I don't have a printer that does wide format, so I don't keep 12 by 12, 12 by 15, anything like that. I can only do the normal letter size width, but it can be longer, so I can have that A4 that's almost 12 inches in one direction, but it's just it's about 8 1/4 in the other. Okay, so those are the 3 photo papers I keep on hand. If I have one photo that I want to make more prominent, then a 5x7 is a natural choice because it's the happy medium between the 4x6 and the A4. But I can also print multiple photos on a 4x6, which means, and of course you can print multiple photos on the 5x7 on the A4. But to me, this is a nice combination that works well with the ratio, because the 4x6, I can print them so that we've got kind of a similar, well, you've got a nice balanced ratio. These two together are a little bit taller than this 5x7 because there's a white border in the middle. But if I squish them together, these two in height are the same as this one. I hope that makes a little sense. So it's narrower, but if I add them up, they match. It just gives me a little bit of balance to think, okay, so I have one that's big and these two are not going to look out of place even though they're smaller. But you don't need to do any sort of mathematical working that out. It's just what I find 2 on a 4x6 and 1 on a 5x7 is a nice balance. There we go. Okay, I'm going to use this idea of red and blue, and a lot of the party elements came from the True Stories collection, this rocket. So I'm going to use a mix of Starshine and True Stories papers and embellishments, and I'm going to do a red background, and then I'm going to do a mix on top of the reds. The reds are going to be a frame, and I'm going to use this blue and also this cream text print, and those are both part of the Hubble paper in Starshine. This is the same piece of paper, so I only needed 1 sheet, but I'm going to stretch it and make it look like I used 2 pieces of paper. I was paying attention to the words. I wanted to make sure that I kept the wonder on the text print so that it would show. And then I'm going to run this blue all the way across, but I want the cream to return here at the bottom. So I'm just going to figure out where it's going to go. So I want to cut on this line that starts with clarity. And I'm not worried. I could do this on the trimmer, of course, but it's going to be covered up, so I don't worry about it. And then I can piece this all together so it looks like it's all, looks like the cream layer here is all one piece of paper that hasn't been cut apart, and the blue is a different piece entirely. And that's made a little bit easier because this one I've cut a little bit off the edge and this one I have not. So this one goes all the way across. And I can use the text to get everything pretty much straight, in theory. Okay, and now I have nice simple background built to work on top. And one of the first things that I would tend to do is bring this photo right down and cover that blue. But because I've gone with the lighter tone here and just a little bit of the blue, actually I want to pick this up and work here. And what I'm going to do is add more paper layers behind this photo. To add the layers of color behind this main photo, I'm going to use a mix of 6x6 pattern papers and some 12x12 cut down to be smaller. And I have this one and this one both from the True Stories 6x6, and then this is a red from a Simple Stories 6x6. It was a nice match to the red. And so these three are going to stay intact at the 6x6 sides. I'm just going to take off these perforations here. And so I'll start my layering with those, and then I'm going to put 2 more layers behind there at least, so that I end up with this stacked paper effect. Now, I want to keep the rocket kind of on the diagonal, so I'd like to have the rocket up there, say, and then the blue, because I don't want this blue to be too close to this dark blue. And then I need some contrast, so I'll add the red behind those two. And then I think I'll tighten that all up a little bit so there's not quite so much that's showing. Now I have options here. If I want to save more of those papers, I can go ahead and cut away what's not going to be shown. So I don't need all of that red, but these 2 blues are going to show at the bottom. So if I wanted to take some away, I would need to take it from the middle if I want it to continue to show here. In this case I do. I will go ahead and cut this red so that I can stretch it and have some show on both ends. So now I have a start to this mix, and I'll go ahead and start adhering. I'm looking for really small angles and the look of when you take a big mess of papers and you gather them on your desk so that you can stack them into a nice neat pile, but you haven't done that stage yet. So you've got the big mess and you've brought it into a smaller mess, but before I've done the stack. That's what I'm always going for when I do a paper stack like this. And then I just hold things in place, move things around and add adhesive. Because I want to add more layers behind this, remember, so I'm not committing to where all of these are going to go just yet. Okay, and then I wanted to bring in some bigger pieces and some more contrast. I could go ahead and put the blue here and then have the yellow as this high contrast behind the stack, but then you'll see I get these 2 really similar shades next to each other. What I'd like to have instead, is to have a big block of this shocking yellow, which is from the Jen Hadfield Everyday Pebbles collection, by the way. And then this soft blue behind that in quite a small frame. I better get a spot for these 2 photos before I go any further. And I had left them attached at this point because sometimes it works well. Like I could work in a box and have them stay intact. But I think this particular layout is going to work best if I cut them apart. I just needed to make sure I wasn't making that decision too early. And I have empty space here in the in this big photo that I don't mind covering. So what I need to do is figure out where these 2 should go, obviously. And I want to keep the rocket if I can. And I want to keep as much of this blue as I can. And I think I'm okay with overlapping them a little bit like that. Okay, that's going to work, and I'm just going to make sure that I have plenty of room around the outside because I'm not putting any matte on these photos at this point. And it might be that along the way, oh, I've done that one a little bit too high. I wasn't worried about that. And it might be that along the way I realize there needs to be some layering behind them, in which case it's nice to have space around here that I don't have to worry about there being glue, and then I can just tuck things behind. So I have my big photo, I have my two small photos, and I still have plenty of room for lots of embellishment, a big title, and to put some journaling somewhere. I've got a few different options for journaling because I could always put put a card or something that works in this space here. I could journal straight onto this yellow, or I could add some sort of journaling piece in this sort of space. I'm thinking a title will work really well up here because I have all these different horizontal lines that I could stack my letters on. So time to figure out where all those things need to go. If I'm working with multiple photos and they're taking up more of the page real estate than I'm used to on most of my pages, then those little hunches, like I see these horizontal lines and those will be good for title letters, are a really good way to just run with the design and not worry too much about plotting it all out. I also think that if it's a case where I have plenty of photos, where my original quandary is which photos do I choose and how many pages do I make, I worry a little bit less about if I run out of journaling room because I know there's another page to come. And if I have 2 pages on one topic, if I really run out of journaling space, I can always add something in between the 2 of them in my album, a 6x12, even a 4x6 little page protector where I can just put journaling if I ran out of room on the other 2. So if I have a hunch, then it's a good plan usually to just go ahead and run with that idea. So I'm going to run a title across these lines, and I'm going to put some embellishment here in the top corner. Because it's a birthday page, I want to bring in some numbers, and I like this idea of using a ruler and just circling the number, or making it maybe that I end up covering up the 2 and the 3, because I just want to bring your attention to the 1. So that also, the yellow pulls together the yellow in the layering. And if you look in this photo, there's just this tiniest little bit of yellow. And that's why I wanted to have yellow as this contrast, but also part of, it was part of the party color scheme, but it was a minor color. Wanted to do red lettering. So I've actually pulled out some letters from my Christmas collection. So this is Fitzgerald, which has lots of colors now. Gold, silver, black, red, and turquoise. And all of those are glitter except the black was plain foam, I believe. So I'm going to run the title up here, hoping to end at the ruler right before the 1. First and last words of the title in those red Fitzgerald glitter thickers, and then this is a really several years old glitter on chipboard thickers, and then these yellow letters are October Afternoon in the little sets of 2, where you get 2 different alphabets, and that's one of them. Okay, so there's my title. I want some embellishment over here and to draw attention to this 1. I need to make room for my journaling, and I need some other embellishment to balance it. Okay, I thought these balloons bring the red and the yellow up to the top of the page, and they also happen to be a nice size to cover the 2 and the 3, but leave room here so you can still see it's a ruler. And I'm going to put just some foam squares behind the balloons so that they are lifted up on the page a little bit. But I'm going to glue the bottom flat, so that it has that little bit of difference as you go across the embellishment. Super, super simple. Now there is that pink balloon, and if the pink seems out of place at the end, I might bring a blue embellishment, like I could put a blue star or an enamel dot or something. I wouldn't take the pink away, I would just add blue to it. But I'm not too worried. Now I want to use these rockets that match the party motifs. But I don't want to put a rocket here with the balloons because they're not to scale. It'd be like the giantest balloons ever. Okay, so what I want to do then is find a way to make the balloons fit other than, you know, looking at it and going, oh, well, it's a birthday party. Of course I can have balloons. Of course I can, but it would be nice to have something that brings the balloons together with the rocket. And what's with the rocket is the clouds. And I have, from the die cut pack that this is from, I also have that rocket and quite a few clouds. So I'm going to put one of these sets of clouds, like this one, up here with the balloons. That on foam squares as well, and pop dots, so that the clouds are overlapping the balloons. And now I have the balloons are flying up in the sky, in the same sky with the clouds, because the clouds are the same design as the clouds next to the rockets. And that makes me happy. And this blue is a nice one with that blue, and yeah. Okay, and I have room to add more to this grouping. I'm thinking I might end up with this red heart up here, but I'm not sure. I'm just going to put it there for the moment. Okay, so then I also have this rocket here. I have one more rocket die cut and 2 more cloud options. And I have this rocket on the transparency. It's all the same rocket. And in the transparency pack, there's a bunch of transparencies in here, by the way. This is from True Stories, and it has 12 transparencies, a mix of 4x4 and 4x6, some of which include color printing, some are white, and some are silver foil. Yep. Anyway, if you use them and you take them out and they look a little bit lackluster, it's because they have a protective plastic coating. It needs to come off. And then all of a sudden the color is much brighter and they are nice and crystal clear. So I thought this could work well with journaling. And then I was looking at just plain, like plain lined paper designs to go behind the transparency, which would make sense and would work perfectly. But I then remembered I also have this one, which has a numbered list and red lines. And this is the 6x6 version from the original collection. And first collection I did with American Crafts. So what I'm going to do, I was just looking, and my options, if I go all the way to the edge, then the numbers are directly behind the rocket. What I prefer to do is have the edge of the transparency line up with the edge of the grid. I'll take this bit off, and then I will have the numbers alongside the rocket. So I get my numbers as a birthday motif, and I also get the combination of rockets and numbers so that it's a little bit like a countdown to a blast off. So silly little things like that make me happy as well. Now where's it going to go? If it went here, let me see if I can. This is a nice balance in where the layers are stacked, but it does 2 things that don't help. I lose almost all the journaling space. I'm only going to be able to journal here because the rocket is here and all of this space is covered. I'm also losing all of that navy blue pattern paper that I wanted in. So, boop, 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 boop. If I move it up a bit, I get more journaling space. Although not a huge amount, has to be said. It's still mostly a rocket and not a lot of journaling space. But because the rocket is on that side of the transparency, I think those are my 2 options really. It needs to be on this side of the page somewhere, if it's going to stay on the layout. The other thing I could do is to keep it out entirely and have it be this kind of add-on where it's here, and so that I have a 6x12 for the journaling. That could also work. It would also give me a place to put more photo. I could make this into a 6x12 page, and using some of the scraps that I have left over here. It could work, but I think it would be nice to get it on the page if I can. Here's my compromise. Because if you see what I'm doing here, I'm covering up almost all of it. what I'm going to do is cut a bunch of that away. I don't need to worry about the transparency because the part I'm cutting away is clear. But this is what I'm going to have, and the transparency is all going to be tucked under. Now I'm looking at the placement of the rocket. I really am just going to use this as a motif now, the numbers and the rocket. And there are lines here, but the lines are going to then be something that repeats elsewhere, and I'm going to put the journaling on this part and probably tuck it down here somewhere. So I have a rocket here, and a rocket here, and a rocket here. I want to get them so they are in a good balance. And I think I also don't need so much height. I don't need the full height. I want the rocket, and I'm going to lose some of this. So let's cut it down. And then I can place this one behind. I can still have, I'm losing some, but not all of my navy. And I can bring this further down here. Rather than, here it's just too level. And here I end up with this kind of wonky line rather than a nice diagonal line. So it just works a little better if I can bring it down so that it's dotting about the page, so that your eye is moving from one to the next to the next. So it needs to be further down here. Okay, so I'm going to put some adhesive just on this edge that I'm going to cover up. Glue my transparency to the pattern paper, and then the pattern paper to the background. Now with a transparency, if there wasn't an element that you were going to cover up, just use the kind of adhesives that that look nice. So don't think glue. Think stitches, brads, staples, things like that. You'll get there. Okay. And remember, if you're going to put something on top, you could also hide the glue there. So I could put glue behind here because that's on top. Okay, I think I need cloud over here to bring this together maybe. Yeah. And then I need to sort out this area of the page that has a lot it needs to hold now. It needs the journaling, and it needs a little bit of embellishment to make all of the rest of it fit together. If I bring those journaling lines down right around here and keep that same little bit of angle, so this blue piece is angled on the page, and then I'm keeping this in line with it by matching up that edge with this red line. I'll fit my journaling here, and I'll do that before I add any embellishment in this spot so that I make sure I don't need to add another column of journaling. As it goes, my writing has fit pretty perfectly in there. I could go into a longer story, and then I was realizing that the story that popped into my head when I looked at this big picture, I actually decided I really didn't want to record in depth on this page. And I'll tell you why, just in case you ever do this and it's useful to you. Although I was really happy with how the whole party looked and all the rocket motifs, and then I was definitely happy with everybody that we had as guests, and everybody was in a good mood, and the kids were all having a brilliant time. I'm really hard on myself with silly little things, like I was really not very happy that I did a technique on this cake that I'd never done before, and it went a bit wrong, and it just looks really, imperfect to my eye. And I tend to be quite critical of myself on things like that. And the more I looked at the cake as I was making the page, the more I was letting that seep into my head, and that was winning in my head versus the nice stories of the day. I don't want him to look back and read this sometime and think, oh, well, all she remembers about the day is that the cake wasn't good enough. That's not it at all. It was only because I was working on it and I'm looking at that picture for a long amount of time that the story kind of skewed itself in my head. So in the end, I've just made one little note about the cake in the journaling, but focused on the happy stuff and all of the good, wonderful parts of the day instead of my having to moan about my my cake abilities. Okay, so don't be so hard on yourself. That's what I'm trying to tell myself. Anyway. Okay, so I have this space left over, and I have one more rocket die cut, so I might as well throw it in, right? And I put it right there, and that actually looks a little disjointed, so I wonder about bringing the clouds here and bringing the rocket further over to the side. Now, we talk a lot about triangles and that whole idea of having three things that frame. And there are a few different ways you can look at this on this page. I do have three of the same identical rocket, just in different sizes and different materials. Okay, but I do actually have 4 rockets on the page because of the one on the cake. But the one that's different, the one that's a photo and not the same exact rocket illustration, is in the center of those 3. I also have this piece, which doesn't have a rocket at this point, and that is separate, but it's still framing. So keep in mind that when we say a triangle, yes, it's really easy to make a triangle with 3, and obviously that makes an actual triangle. But you can use the same technique as a visual triangle and change the shape. You can have a visual square, you can frame something, you can have a circle around something, and they all do a very similar thing to your eye as you look at the page. And it's just giving your eye something to look at that goes around what you really want them to look at. So it depends on your style, but how you could have, this could be a really sparse page and you could just have 3 embellishments and I would look at what's in the middle. Or it could be way, way, way busier than this, and if I had something that catches my eye like that in a 3 or a 4 or a circle, I'm going to look at the middle. So don't worry about it having to be exactly 3 all the time. Chances are there are multiple ways to interpret it on your page to make it frame the important elements. Yep. I think it's also good to keep in mind that sometimes, from page to page, you can have more embellishment on one page and less embellishment on another page, and that's fine. What holds our albums together and keeps us looking at the photos is that basically there are photos on every page, or maybe we do the odd one without photos, but by and large, there are photos on every page, and because of that, as we turn the pages in an album, we start to look for the photos. And we look at the photos first, and the embellishment forms this lovely little frame around the edges. And so don't worry too much about if your embellishment style is completely consistent from page to page, or if you do a page and you think, oh, this one is actually really heavily embellished, is that not going to work? Chances are it will be absolutely fine once it's in your album and you look at it next to everything else. What I'm trying here is that I want to have this even higher than that, so I want extra foam. Just doing 2 layers. If I thought about that cleverly, I do have pop dots that are different heights, some that are half height and some that are double height, or whatever, however you want to do those ratios. But I did not think that through in advance, so instead I'm just going to stick 2 in a little stack. That works as well. Okay. Now, coming back up here, I've got this little empty space that I don't love. Would the heart make it better? I'm not sure that the heart is best there because the shape of the clouds is similar to the shape of the top of the heart, and it looks a little odd, as much as I love a red heart. So maybe I bring this red heart down here. I don't want it here because that's going to intrude on the photo too much. But I have all these little corners, and that's where I'm looking to see, does it fit in a little frame there anywhere? I'm going to put it there. I wonder if I would be happier with this if I move the clouds down a little bit. I think that might be it. And I want some darker blue in this one. So I need a darker blue embellishment that I can put up there. Okay, easy peasy. Dark blue enamel dots. 1, 2, 3. Just separating this because the blue against the blue was harder to see. And I have a couple left. I know I've just said, I moved that because it was blue on blue, and I'm keeping the blue on blue here. And that's okay. No, I think I want to keep it away from the photo and keep it just on the embellishment. So maybe it goes on the rocket itself. And I think with all these little circles, actually, I don't necessarily need a third one. But maybe put one down here. Yep. I feel like it needs just a tiny little bit of metallic sparkle. I know it's got a lot of glitter going on in the title. But I'd like to just have a little bit of gold. And I think that will help bring the white and the cream together a little bit, to have the warmth of the gold in a couple different places. Just a little bit, not much at all. And that's the Heidi Swap Color Shine in Gold Laine, metallic gold. There we go. And I think that's everything. And so from 50 photos down to, I think it's going to be 3 or 4 layouts. And a couple of them are going to have multiple photos, and a couple of them are single photo pages. By the time they're all done, I'll put them all together so that you can see them all in one place. But for the time being, this is one done, and I'm going to go on to another one, but that's not going to be in this video. So do stop by Shimelle.com, or when I finish those layouts, I'll put a link below. How about that? So that you can jump right to them and find them all together once they're finished. Okay, thanks so much for watching. And if you want to chat and share your work and talk about all things scrapbooking, please join us at our Facebook group called Scrapbook Like a Superhero. And I also, on Monday, published the details of the next class I'm going to be teaching online, which is called The Scrapbook Process, which is about how pages become albums, and not just the process you see of a process video where it's one layout from start to finish, but the larger process of having all of those layouts work together to form an album. It's a natural continuation from my class Cover to Cover, which documents my album system and how I work from photos to layouts to albums. But you don't have to take Cover to Cover to take the scrapbook process. They work together, but you don't have to have both of them. And the material is different, so if you took Cover to Cover, it is going to be different stuff in this one. Okay, you can read about it on Shimelle.com. You can talk to me anytime. I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.